Well, thanks for stopping scrolling for what's going to be a 5-minute Bible study. As we approach this concept of both spiritual and emotional health from the Bible, we continue to find ties between what science says about emotional health and what the Bible says about spiritual health. For example, WebMD tells us that one way to be emotionally healthy is this: stay connected. Community is important. Plan regular shared time with friends and family members. Virtual connections are good, but seeing someone in person once in a while it's helpful too. Could the Bible, written even before the internet, is that possible? Line up with this? Yeah, that'd be a yes. Hebrews 10:24 says this: Let's think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. Community and connectedness, they're key, both to spiritual and emotional health, which I argue are highly connected. The Centers for Disease Control says this: when people are socially connected and have stable and supportive relationships, they're more likely to make healthy choices and to have better mental and physical health outcomes. They're also better able to cope with hard times, stress, anxiety, depression. The church is that place for believers to socially connect and have stable and supportive relationships. It doesn't matter whether your church has 25 members or 25,000 members. You can connect with those 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 people closely. My preacher calls that your circle, which I like. I've called it the core for many years. I want to tell you about a guy who was disconnected and then became connected. His name was Paul the Apostle. You might know that Paul, before he was a believer in Jesus, was a pretty angry fellow. He seemed to be pretty disconnected too. He was in a group that killed a believer, but he was so disconnected that while others killed him, he just held their clothes. He was described this way. Acts 8:3 says this: Saul was going everywhere to destroy the church. He went from house to house, dragging out both men and women to throw them into prison. His anger and his pain were obvious. But at some point he met Jesus, and he started to hang out with believers more and more. He wasn't good at that, by the way. Like some of us, he ghosted the church. But he had a friend. In Acts 11:25 it says, Then Barnabas went to Tarsus to look for Saul. When he found him, he brought him back to Antioch. Both of them stayed there with the church for a full year, teaching large crowds of people. It was at Antioch that the believers were first called Christians. You see Paul's connectedness there. And we see both his emotional health and his spiritual health increasing as he connects with the people in his church at Antioch. And then at the churches he starts on a missionary journey, he goes on with his friend Barnabas. He was still pretty direct in some ways, but he also becomes pretty mellow. Philippians 2:2 goes like this: Is there any encouragement from belonging to Christ? Is there any comfort from his love? Any fellowship together in his spirit? Are your hearts tender and compassionate? Then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, working together with one mind and purpose. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble. Thinking of others is better than yourself. Don't look out for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. See, he continues to connect to the end of his life with his core group. He wrote letters to the churches he helped start. He wrote letters to friends he had traveled with, starting churches and ministering to churches. Instead of being angry, he was vulnerable and tender. In 2 Timothy 4, he's writing almost the last thing he'll ever write, and he says, Only Luke is with me. Bring Mark when you come, because he'll be helpful to me in my ministry. I sent Tychicus to Ephesus. When you come, be sure to bring the coat I left with Carpus at Troas. Also, bring my books, and especially my papers. The guy who ran a program of terrorism against Christians asks for favors, and for a friend to come that he had a big argument with. His emotional and spiritual health was strong because of his connectedness. God bless you. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Day of Devotion. A quick special note. I added some items to my Amazon page. You can check that out if you look in my profile and see if there's anything in there that interests you. And God bless you. We'll talk to you later on Day of Devotion.